Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah,
Okay, get ready, because we're exploring a really unique source today.
we are.
We're taking on Ambra Grisea, Ambra Gris, but we're not just looking at the substance itself.
No, the focus is different.
Right. Our deep dive is into a specific description of it. It's found in a homeopathic Materia Medica by William Boericke.
And right from the start, this source presents something quite unusual, wouldn't you say?
Definitely.
According to this particular text, ambergris originates as a, and this is the quote, morbid secretion of the whale.
A morbid secretion. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It immediately sets a fascinating and maybe somewhat peculiar stage for what follows.
Absolutely. So our mission here, just to be clear, is to unpack exactly what this specific text says about Ambra Grisea. Who it's supposedly for, the specific ways it was understood, documented within this system.
Yeah.
We're really treating the text itself as our map here.
Exactly. And Materia Medicas, well, they're like these detailed guidebooks from their time, aren't they? They link substances to what they called symptom pictures and patient profiles.
Right.
So this text, it lays out who might be a suitable candidate for Ambra Grisea.
Okay, so let's look at that profile then. What kind of picture does the text paint? Who is this remedy described as being for?
It lists several types. People who are easily excited, nervous children,
Okay.
also thin, nervous patients. It even specifically notes thin, scrawny women.
Huh. And it also mentions those described as hysterical subjects, right? Or people
Yes.
with spinal irritation. And it links those conditions directly to symptoms like a convulsive cough and eructation.
Right, eructation, which is, essentially belching.
Got it.
The text also suggests it's for people weakened by age or perhaps overwork. Maybe someone anemic or having trouble sleeping.
So a weakness component.
Definitely. And there's a distinct focus on the aged, describing them with impaired functions, general weakness, coldness, and a really significant symptom, numbness.
Numbness in the aged. Does it get specific about where, like the location?
It does, yeah. It often affects single parts, like fingers or arms.
Interesting.
And that theme of one-sided complaints also comes up for patients suited to Ambra Grisea, according to Boericke's text here.
That specificity, the single parts, the one-sided issues.
Yeah.
It's quite striking.
Yeah.
What about the general characteristics? What's the overall theme the text highlights for Ambra Grisea?
Well, the core seems to be extreme nervous hypersensitiveness. That phrase really stands out.
Hypersensitiveness, okay.
The text also describes external numbness. Sometimes it says of the whole body, particularly noticeable in the morning.
Whole body numbness.
Yeah. And there's a general sense of weakness, and it mentions a nervous bilious temperament.
Nervous bilious, okay.
And yes, that numbness of single parts. It's listed again under the general characteristics, really emphasizing its importance in the text's view.
It's really interesting how often that nervous hypersensitivity theme keeps popping up, connecting back to those patient profiles you mentioned.
It does seem central.
Now, text gets really specific, doesn't it? Detailing symptoms system by system. Let's maybe start with the mind. That seems like a big one here.
Oh, it is. This section is quite vivid, actually. The text describes a dread of people, a strong desire to be alone.
So very withdrawn.
Yeah, and an inability to do anything if others are present. It really paints a picture of someone intensely shy, someone who blushes easily.
And here's a detail that, it really stands out to me. It feels quite unique to this description. It says, music causes weeping.
It does. That's a very specific emotional trigger listed right there.
Wow.
And the text also includes deeper states like despair, even a loathing of life, and mentions fantastic illusions.
Goodness.
Bashfulness, a loss of the love of life, restlessness, and then paradoxically being very loquacious, like very talkative.
Talkative, but also a dread of people. That's a fascinating contradiction the text seems to be noting there.
It is a complex internal state, clearly. It also says time passes slowly for these individuals and thinking is difficult.
When is thinking difficult?
Particularly in the morning or for older people, according to the text. And they tend to dwell on unpleasant things. It's quite a detailed psychological profile the text builds up.
Truly a complex mental picture, according to this specific source. Okay, moving on to the head symptoms. What does the text list there?
Well, it lists slow comprehension first, then vertigo, dizziness is mentioned, often linked with weakness in the head and the stomach.
That link again.
Yeah. There's pressure described on the front of the head, sometimes alongside mental depression.
It also mentions a tearing pain in the upper half brain, and specifically senile dizziness, again, reinforcing that focus on the aged patient profile. What else for the head?
A rush of blood to the head is listed. And interestingly, it's again linked to listening to music.
Music again.
Yeah, tying the head symptoms right back to that peculiar musical sensitivity we saw described under the mind section.
That connection is really strong in this text.
It is. Then, impaired hearing, epistaxis that's nosebleeds, especially in the morning,
Okay.
profuse bleeding from the teeth, and even hair loss. That completes the picture for the head symptoms in this text.
Wow, quite a lot going on in the head, according to Boericke. Okay, let's look at the stomach symptoms next.
Right. A key feature here is eructations, that belching we mentioned earlier.
Yes.
But here it's specifically linked to a violent convulsive cough.
Cough and belching together.
That's what it says. The text also mentions acid eructations, feeling like heartburn.
And is there anything about timing for digestive issues?
Yes, distension of the stomach and abdomen, especially after midnight. That's quite specific.
It is.
Plus a sensation of coldness in the abdomen.
That link between digestive issues and a cough, it's interesting. You sometimes see that kind of connection explored in historical medical texts, don't you?
You do, in various ways. Okay, let's move on to the urinary symptoms described here.
What does the text note for urinary?
It notes pain in both the bladder and the rectum occurring at the same time.
Simultaneously, okay.
Yeah. Also, burning sensations at the orifice of the urethra and the anus. And another very specific description,
What's that?
a feeling in urethra as if a few drops passed out.
Wow, that's incredibly precise sensory detail.
It's very characteristic of these materia medicas. Burning and itching in the urethra while urinating are also listed.
And the urine itself.
The text describes the urine as turbid, sort of cloudy, even during emission, and forming a brown sediment later.
Okay, got it. Right, on to the female symptoms listed in this source.
Okay. The text lists nymphomania.
Okay.
It also describes itching of the pudendum, the external female genitalia, often accompanied by soreness and swelling. Menses are described as too early, profuse, and linked with a bluish leukorrhea. Bluish leukorrhea, yes. A type of discharge that's apparently worse at night, according to the text.
And this next one is quite striking. The text mentions a discharge of blood between periods at every little accident. That suggests a notable sensitivity or maybe fragility, doesn't it? According to this description.
It certainly seems to. The male symptoms listed are fewer, but equally specific according to the text.
What does it say for male symptoms?
The text notes voluptuous itching of the scrotum.
Okay.
It describes the sensation in the parts as, get this, externally numb but burning internally.
Numb outside, burning inside. That's specific.
Very. And another really interesting disconnect. Violent erections without voluptuous sensations.
Huh. Another one of those specific details painting a picture of potentially disconnected physical and sensory experiences.
Exactly. In this state, as the text describes it. Moving on, let's explore the respiratory system symptoms.
Right, respiratory. What's listed?
Asthmatic breathing is listed. And again, it's linked with eructation of gas.
There's that digestive respiratory connection again.
A nervous spasmodic cough is prominent, often with hoarseness and eructation.
Okay.
Frequently on waking in the morning, and specifically noted as worse in presence of people.
So that links right back to the mental symptom, the dread of people we talked about earlier.
Precisely. The text also lists tickling sensations, throat, larynx, trachea, a feeling of chest oppression, getting out of breath when coughing.
It sounds quite distressing.
It does. It describes a hollow, spasmodic, barking cough coming from deep in chest, and also notes choking when trying to hawk up phlegm.
The cough descriptions are incredibly detailed in this source. Very specific language.
Yeah.
How does the text describe symptoms related to the heart?
Palpitation is the main feature mentioned.
Okay.
The text describes it with a sense of pressure in chest, as from a lump lodged there, or as if chest was obstructed.
A physical sensation of obstruction.
Yes. Patients are described as being conscious of their pulse, feeling their own heartbeat. And palpitation can also occur in the open air, sometimes with a pale face, according to the text.
That consciousness of the pulse, it feels like another aspect of that nervous hypersensitivity theme we keep seeing, doesn't it?
It could well be, yeah. It fits that pattern. What about sleep?
What does the text say about sleep?
It states that patients cannot sleep from worry, must get up.
So restlessness driven by worry.
Exactly. They're described as having anxious dreams. And during sleep, they might experience coldness of the body and twitching of limbs.
And the skin symptoms mentioned. Any connection there?
Well, itching and soreness are noted, particularly around the genitals.
Ah, that ties into symptoms we saw earlier, in the female section especially.
It does. Numbness of the skin is mentioned again, generally. And the text uses that common phrase describing the sensation, arms go to sleep.
Right, that pins and needles feeling. Finally, the extremities. What does it say there?
The text lists cramps, specifically in the hands and fingers, described as being worse when grasping anything.
Worse on grasping.
And also cramps in the legs.
So we've walked through this really detailed and, sometimes surprising landscape of symptoms and patient types, all as described in this specific Boericke text.
It's quite a map.
Materia medicas also usually outline what makes symptoms better or worse. The modalities, right? What does this source say about Ambra Grisea's modalities?
Yes. These are crucial for understanding how the text suggests, applying the remedy within that system. According to the source, symptoms are made worse by music.
There it is again, music.
Yeah. Also, the presence of strangers, linking back to the shyness and dread.
Right.
Worse from any unusual thing, it says. Also, worse in the morning and in a warm room.
Worse from music, and music causes weeping. So there's a really strong, specific link that's emphasized multiple times in this text. It's quite distinctive.
It really is.
And what does the text say makes things better? The ameliorations.
Okay, so the text lists slow motion and open air.
Slow motion outside.
Also lying on the painful part. And cold drinks are listed as things that improve the symptoms described for Ambra Grisea.
Very particular conditions for improvement there. Lastly, these texts often note relationships with other remedies or dosage information. What does Boericke's text say here?
Right. It's explicitly stated not to confuse Ambra Grisea with amber, which is a different substance, succedaneum.
Good clarification.
Musk is mentioned as a remedy that frequently follows Ambra Grisea advantageously, according to this system.
Okay.
And the text suggests comparisons with other remedies too, like oleum succinum, specifically for hiccup, cymbal, castor, asphyctida, crocus, and lilium.
And the dose. What dose does this text recommend for Ambra Grisea?
The recommended doses are the second and third potencies.
Potencies. Those are the specific dilution levels used in homeopathy.
Exactly. And the text adds a note that they may be repeated with advantage, according to this source anyway.
Well, that was quite the journey through Boericke's description of Ambra Grisea.
Yeah.
We've covered its very unusual origin as a whale secretion.
Yeah, starting there.
The specific kinds of patients the text says it's suited for, and this really wide, sometimes peculiar range of symptoms it addresses, from a dread of people and crying at music to very specific physical complaints like that numbness or the cough, all the way down to what makes them better or worse according to this one text.
It really does give you a fascinating window, doesn't it, into how medical knowledge and remedies were documented and, categorized within this particular system and time period.
Totally.
The level of detail, even for symptoms that seem quite subjective or maybe even disconnected from the substance's origin, that detail is a defining feature of these materia medicals.
Exactly. And exploring texts like this, it isn't about validating current medical practice, obviously.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the historical approach.
Right.
How observations, symptom substances,
Yeah.
how they were perceived and linked together back then. It really offers a fascinating historical and, you could say, cultural perspective.
Absolutely. So thinking about the specific description of Ambra Grisea we've just unpacked, this, secretion of a whale linked in this text, to everything from blushing and a fear of strangers to cramps and a bluish discharge.
Yeah.
What does the sheer specificity and sometimes the seemingly unrelated nature of these symptoms, as they're listed here, what does that tell us about the historical logic or framework that was being used to understand and categorize human ailments in this particular way?
That's a great question. It really makes you pause and think about the underlying assumptions, doesn't it? A thought to definitely ponder.